Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Association Leadership Radio. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Association Leadership Radio, and I'm joined today with Cynthia Mills, and she is with the Leaders Haven. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Lee. It's great to be with you today.
Well, I'm excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us a little bit about the Leaders Haven. How you serving folks?
Absolutely. Well, I put the Leaders Haven together after about 20 years of serving in the CEO spot. I found that I really enjoyed working in the areas of strategy, governance, and leadership, including executive coaching. And so my work tends to go in those three areas, but I also do a lot of book writing, and I also do a lot of speaking and webinars and those sorts of things as well.
So now, when you say Leaders Haven, what does that kind of mean?
Well, there is nothing more difficult, I think, particularly in the 2020s, than being a leader. And I'm very pleased that we have people who are willing to step into extraordinary variables in the transformational 2020s. And so I wanted to create a place where boards and individual leaders could feel like they could really explore the uncertainty of the times that we're in, and to realize that there's no playbook, that we have the freedom to design into this experience that we're in and to create possibility, but to do so in a way where people feel emboldened to do that and not overwhelmed by the environment we find ourselves in.
Are you finding that leaders today are more open to sharing their vulnerabilities and their challenges with a group and then forming partnerships rather than saying, I've got this all figured out, just follow me? I have all the answers.
Yeah, I think the short answer to that is yes, in general. There's certainly some who are struggling to get comfortable with that. It's certainly a very different leadership style than, of decades before. What I'm finding is that leaders who understand their roles really well and are allowing boards and staff to be able to play those roles well, be entrepreneurial and change leaders, but engage in this as learning organizations and not in the blame game. A pilot and test mentality as we begin to identify opportunities and build more enterprise types of models. It's really important to allow people to run with that. And that requires vulnerability and people being willing to say, hey, these are the mistakes we learned. These are the lessons that we learned out of that. Now we're going to build in an even more bold way. And I think when we can get there and have that perspective from volunteers, boards, and staff, we have an opportunity to do some pretty remarkable things.
Right. And I think at the heart of that is that vulnerability, that ability to, like you said, to kind of test, learn, and iterate rather than I know everything and this is how it's going to play out, when everybody is really just taking educated guesses. And we got to be okay with, misses, because you can't really, find the edges unless you're really pushing. You can't do tomorrow what you did yesterday and expect the same result.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I had the opportunity to do end of 19, was to speak before a number of CEOs. And I had put together what I usually use to sort of scare boards a little bit before strategy. And what I mean by that is it's not uncommon for leaders to be so focused on where they're headed to not see a lot of other complex variables that are coming together. And I felt like that was part of what was happening at the end of 2019. And what fascinated me about it was, after people said nice things, it was followed by one sentence. And everybody said the same thing: "You scared me to death." And what's interesting to me about that was before the COVID of the last couple of years, before the elevation of social injustice conversations to today's levels, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and polarization to the level we're in, those sorts of things. And so if we can have open conversations about all of those variables, be vulnerable about it, but also be respectful. I think one of the things that I find a lot of time is being spent on as people reach out to me is how do I design those conversations, right? So people may be open to being vulnerable, but by the same token, the expertise to design those conversations is something that I'm finding that both seasoned and aspiring CEOs are really struggling with, as well as boards. And so it's one thing to say, let's be vulnerable, but it's another thing to say, well, how do we have the expertise to do that well, and then come up with something that is also something we can execute on.
But isn't that an opportunity for consultants and people that have the kind of the outsider perspective with fresh eyes looking at something where they can help elegantly have these conversations with folks that may not have the skills that they do, and they can also take some of the heat and some of the pressure off of these boards and these people that are working these organizations?
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. And you know, one of the things that the elements around that, is this idea of, what people wish they were actually saying to each other. And so, I hear things like, the pace is not sustainable. And we talk a lot about the idea of, well, how do we put a reasonableness test in place when we're in a design process, where two or more are gathered, we can come up with things to do, but what are the most important strategic priorities that we need to identify? And then how do we do that in a way where the pace is sustainable? And that is one of the places where someone from the outside can come in and bring that up as an issue. Whereas, that's sometimes tougher for staffs or CEO to say, well, wait a minute, we can't just keep adding on, and so I think what we have to do is be able to help them learn how to say no to some certain things, learn how to help them really create strategic breakthroughs by focusing priorities. And as you said, taking a little bit of that heat so that at the end of that, we have really high structured strategic frameworks that people feel comfortable operating within. And then we've got all the people who've been engaged in the design ready to go and work together. And if there's anything where heat needs to be taken, that's left where the consultant was and not within the group of people that need to jointly execute together.
Right. And because that's ultimately the goal of the consultant, is to leave the organization in a better place. It doesn't matter who takes the credit. You're just trying to help them get there.
Yeah, being a consultant is definitely not about taking credit. I think the thing that thrills me the most is when people exceed their own expectations of themselves. There is nothing like that moment when you get to watch people own it and watch them get excited about the future they have created. I always think about, if I can come along beside a group of people or an individual and help them with the ideas of how we, build people, how we help them lead dynamics effectively, and then align everything with strategy so that they're exceeding those expectations. I'm a more than happy person and just thrilled to get to watch them fly as a result of that and thrive.
Now, is there a typical point of entry for you and your firm? Is there a pain that these organizations are having where your team is the logical solution?
Well, I would answer your question by actually saying people come to me for a variety of reasons. All of them around things like, how do we maximize our strategy? How do we use our resources thing well? How do we create the dynamics in governance that allow us to both design strategically and lead well? And then, certainly how do we help staff teams to thrive? And so the leadership development around that, as well as helping them understand how to implement strategy and partner with boards. Those are certainly areas that I think everyone is seeking. It's that focused strategy with new models, because our models are changing and are needing to change. And then lastly, how do we function well and in our careers really continue to build ourselves to match the need that's going forth. But sometimes that comes in as a strategy assignment request. Sometimes it comes as executive coaching. Sometimes it comes in as hey, can you come work with the leadership team? All of those are around how do we build people, create dynamics, and align strategy, to thrive.
But are there things that are happening in the organization that maybe symptoms or breadcrumbs that are like something's amiss here? It's time to get kind of another perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I saw through the COVID experience was organizations that had really clear roles established between their board and their staff. Their board and CEO partnership was really well intact, and that didn't change because a crisis hit. They still allowed the CEO to see opportunities, to fill gaps, to run with that inside of an overall strategic framework. Those organizations really continued to thrive and adjust through the crisis. The cracks were where there were political things that had always been in play, and that crisis situation exacerbated that. And so in those circumstances, you get brought in to either do conflict and negotiation management within groups, or you're brought in to do board development, around appropriate roles and communication and those sorts of things. And that's certainly one place that the experience of the last 2 years showed up things. And then I think secondly, we went through a strategic pause for a little while as people were doing crisis leadership. And so then there came another pain point, which was, whoa, we can't continue to be on pause. We've got to accept the dynamics that are here. And now we need to design strategy, knowing that there are a wide variety of variables that are continue to sort of bat us around, but we're going to take control of that and take control of our destiny and be proactive, not reactive. And that was another place where if you're completely staying in the reactive mode, you're going to need some help to shift both your mindset as well as your practices into a more proactive approach and a scenario approach going forward.
So what's your backstory? How did you get involved in this type of leadership and working with organizations specifically?
Well, if you want the real initial story, my mom called me 20-some, 30-some years ago and said, there's this job and it sounds like you. and that's how I actually wound up as the Assistant Executive Director for the National Association of College Auxiliary Services. So I came straight in as a number two into a national organization, and had an extraordinary mentor in the CEO there who was really behind me and my development. And I worked in a variety of organizations, led C6 organizations, C3, C4, and did that over, like I say, a couple of decades. And really realized that my sweet spot was in those areas around strategy, governance, and people development. And so I decided that, I had run businesses and I had reported to boards and partnered with strong staff and board teams. And I really wanted to be able to take all of those lessons learned and skills and be able to help more organizations than going from one organization to another at a time. And so I put all of the sort of track and infrastructure in place starting back in 2006. And then in 2014, end of that year, stepped full time into the Leaders Haven, and have never looked back and have never been happier, and considered a tremendous privilege to walk beside organizations as they find their future and make incredible contributions to our world.
What trend excites you the most about these kind of associations and organizations?
I think that there was an ASA meeting a few years ago when I arrived and thought, my word, it was like the page had been turned and the next generation had showed up en masse, excited and hungry about leadership. And, the DELP program that ASAE had was developing leaders. And it was that moment for me when I went, wow, all of the people that helped raise me up when I was at that space, they were in later years in their career. And it just excited me so much to see how people were taking hold of designing both the profession and also being very excited about the contributions they wanted to make in leadership in all of these organizations. So I'm really excited to continue to watch how emerging professionals, young CEOs, aspiring C-suite leaders continue to develop both the profession and also make contributions that impact the world every day. So that's the thing I'm most excited about and happy to support their work.
Now, is there anything that you could share with the listeners, a piece of advice or something that's actionable today that you think would kind of give a big impact for them tomorrow? Is there some action that they could take that can maybe at least open their mind to moving to a new level?
One of the most exciting things that I've watched being integrated into developing strategic frameworks is the idea of storytelling. And, that's certainly something I work with clients on when we're doing that. I like the model that Steve Denning developed. He says, if you're going to be a change leader, you have to be able to tell the story of the past, why the past won't work anymore, the story of the future, and the bridging story between them. And I have found that clients who are utilizing that template to write that initial story, think about the multiple audiences that they need to tell their story to and adjust the story based on that, can go tomorrow and do that without going through a new strategy exercise. But if they will do it more than once, they will find that the story gets refined. The clarity that brings in boards and staff being able to communicate well with each other, and then for all of them to be ambassadors for what they believe in and what they're trying to accomplish, I think is a critical skill set, but it's also a discipline that you can return to make sure that everyone has the same understandings of what you mean by mission, vision, and strategy as an organization, and align your strategy with that story.
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to understand that true north because, like you said, at the C-suite, they might think there is clarity and they may all be speaking the same language, but it may not be trickling down all the way to the volunteers and the kind of the boots on the ground.
Very, very true. And it can show up in something as simple as sending an email and you think you're being clear, only you get something very different than the instructions. And I learned those sorts of things the hard way, is that, communication is, and I mentioned earlier, the idea of designing conversations. We have gotten to the point where we are so busy that our work can become, checking off tasks instead of thinking about our communication and what we're doing. I mean, we're communicating whether we're being intentional and purposeful about it or not. And so if we will take the time, one interaction at a time, to do that well, not only will we, thrive in our organizations, but I truly think one interaction at a time, that we can not only design meaningful work, but we can really change the world if we do that well.
Yeah, if you can bring that level of mindfulness into every interaction, whether it's at your job or your house, you can change the world. That's for sure. Absolutely.
And, one of the things that I think we have to remember is, leadership is really a moment by moment earned position. And it's granted to you by others because of their belief, trust, and evidence gathered that you have their best interest at heart. And I think sometimes we forget people are always gathering evidence. And in gathering that, let's have them gather the story and then the behaviors that support that story that ingrain in trust and everything in our organizations, which will in turn really help us have strong engagement and keep the momentum going. And all of us need that participation and excitement around our missions. And so I think that's a critical leadership skill at this point.
Right. To create that congruence where what you're saying is matching what you're doing is critical for that belief, and to get the people to do that above and beyond that you need them to do to reach the next level.
Absolutely. And how incredible it is to be able to watch that happen regardless of the environment around us we can either be reactive to our environment, and get batted around like a ping pong ball, or we can be proactive and take control of our destiny. And that's what I love watching with boards and staffs and CEOs, is watching them take control of it and then just make things you never thought could have happened occur. And if you can stay in that positivity, regardless of the environment, it's pretty unstoppable.
Now, do you mind sharing a story, maybe the kind of like you described earlier, maybe kind of the challenge they were having where you came on board to help them, and then, maybe it's around helping them dream bigger, to help them get to a new level, like you said, that they maybe not even could imagine?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is the first thing one has to do is to give them permission. One of everybody walks into, the room, figurative or literal, and they carry with them the experiences they've had, of the past. And one of the most powerful moments I had when I had sort of a duh moment as a CEO was I realized that the group that I was leading in that way at the time, they weren't process people. And so it didn't matter what facilitator that I brought in, they didn't want to engage in process. And I had to help them then subsequently let go of what their traditional thinking was around what strategic planning or building a framework looked like. And they then gave us permission, funnily enough, as staff, to do the initial dreaming based on the expertise of that particular staff, and to come back to them with the start of a framework. And, that's kind of backwards to what a lot of us get taught that we're supposed to do in terms of how strategy gets built. But in that particular situation, that's what that board really wanted to see happen. And we did. And it was so exciting to watch them. Once we sort of gave each other the opposite permissions to be something different, to see what then happened when we all came together with these amazing ideas. And the board wound up being emboldened to do something in that particular industry that at the time nobody would have ever imagined. And they wound up putting a variety of accreditation and credentialing programs in place that fundamentally transformed that industry. And they even began to call it the transformation of the industry. And I was very privileged to be part of that, and then got an opportunity later on to watch all of the words and the storytelling that we used to talk about where we were headed, watched it all then flood back to me a couple of years later. And I realized they had owned it. And so, that was a real lesson to me that I've carried into being a consultant, that the first thing you need to do is really listen to the client and the participants around how they want to do work, and to let go of traditional thinking about either roles or planning and those sorts of things in order for something new to show up in that space. And in that case, that organization has gone on long since I left and leveraged success over success. And it's been a joy to watch them.
Yeah, the impact is real. It's amazing how, kind of you were there when they needed you to be there, and your impact really left a mark. I mean, that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. Well, they're still very dear in my heart, and it's just wonderful to get to watch an organization take hold of a future that that they had a right to have, and then step into it. And I think, again, back to when I said, I love watching people exceed their expectations of themselves. Unleashing that in a group of leaders is a real privilege and a real joy to me.
Right. And I think I really wish and hope more people are bold enough to dream bigger and to put things in place to aim higher and to partner with the right people so you can kind of exceed expectations and go to places you didn't even dream were possible.
Yeah. They're very exciting people to work with. And I think one of the things that we have to remember in this moment in time that we're in is we truly do get to design what comes next. And nobody's going to do it for us. And so we're the ones that have to show up and say yes, and then take that on and then try. We won't always get it exactly perfect and exactly right. And that's what adjusting and learning together is all about. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing to be able to continue to build together, to learn together, and to challenge each other in positive ways.
Well, Cynthia, congratulations on all the success. If somebody wants to learn more, get a hold of you or your team, is there a website they can go to? Absolutely.
It's theleadershaven.com.
Leadershaven.com. Cynthia Mills.
The Leaders.
Theleadershaven.com. So TheLeadershaven.com.
Thank you.
All right. Cynthia Mills, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Association Leadership Radio.